Hello, and welcome to First 100 Days Artist Talk. This one is about health and housing. My name is Conrad Benner, and I'm your host for tonight. I'm a street art blogger and photographer with streetsdepartment.com, that's streetsdept.com, and I'm the curator for First 100 Days. First 100 Days is a project to work with 13 artists to create 13 posters. You see a few of them right there. All around creating posters around policies that Biden-Harris either campaigned on or policies that our artists and our communities hope to push them forward on. The idea is you replace your campaign signs in your windows with these new signs that ask the administration to work for us. And today we'll be talking around with four of our artists around four of our issues, as well as with Justin Termini, a national politics and policy reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. The four artists we'll be talking with are Natalie Hope McDonald, Derick Jones, Lisa Kelley, and Candy Alexandra González. The four issues we'll be talking about today are about the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine. We'll be talking about universal health care for all. We'll be talking about housing for all. And we'll be talking about ending the war on drugs and investing in sort of harm reduction in 2021. The structure of today's talk will be about a half hour with each artist, or with the artists. We'll be talking about how they made their posters, how they take these ideas and turn them into artworks. We'll be talking about how they chose their idea to begin with. You know, a lot of people may or may not know, but mural arts, nor I as the curator, sort of handed down these ideas. These all came up from the artists, from their experience, from their communities. So we'll talk about that process. And then we'll spend about 10, 15 minutes with Jonathan to understand where Biden and Harris are at in DC right now, and use his insights to figure out where we can push their administration forward. We ended our last talk the same way we'll end this talk and our talk in 2 weeks with some action items, you know, what you might be able to do to get these policies move forward. And then we're gonna end with a Q&A. So please type your questions as we go along. But to start, I would love for the artists to introduce themselves. And we can start with Natalie. Natalie, you're muted.
Hi, sorry about that. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Natalie Hope McDonald, and one of the focuses of my poster was the COVID vaccination, something that I thought was really important. I'm an artist here based in Philadelphia.
Awesome, and Derick, just introduce yourself.
Cool. Hey everybody, Derick Jones, local illustrator. I did the universal healthcare for all. Ooh.
Cool. And then Lisa, and then Candy.
Hi, I'm Lisa Kelley, and I'm an artist right outside of Philadelphia, and I did the harm reduction poster.
Hi, y'all. My name is Candy Alexandra González. I am a West Philly-based multidisciplinary artist, trained in book arts and papermaking. But, you know, I'm the perfect Gemini. I do a little bit of everything, and I'm a trauma-informed educator.
And Jonathan, we won't hear from you until a bit later, but would you like to introduce yourself too?
Sure thing. I'm Jonathan Tamari. I'm the Washington correspondent for the Philadelphia Inquirer, national political reporter. I covered the 2020 campaign, and I'm covering the early days of the Biden administration.
Yeah, I'm just as curator, I'm really grateful to have all the artists here. We're doing 3 of these talks. This is our second one, and really grateful to Jonathan to be here too. You know, the artists and I are going to speak from our hearts about why, you know, these issues are important to us, about how they created their artwork. And then Jonathan is really helpful in the sense of like getting to understand a bit like where DC's at. And then again, we can use his insights to figure out maybe how we can push DC forward. The first question, of course, is how did y'all as the artists pick your issues? As I mentioned at the top of this, we didn't sort of hand down issues. We didn't create a list of 50 issues and ask you to pick from them. I just said, what are some issues that are important to you? And I worked with each of you individually to sort of pick from the handful that you sent over just to make sure there wasn't some overlap. Because there was, you know, a few people wanted to do defund the police as an example. So to make sure, you know, we were all kind of doing our own issues. And maybe we can start with Natalie. How did you pick your issue? And then how do you take that idea, that policy that you want to promote, and then turn it into artwork? Can you talk about that process?
Absolutely. I think after a year of living with this COVID pandemic, it seemed as though very few things would be accomplished unless we could get the vaccines into people. So for my poster, I was focused at that point on not only thinking about how the government would get the vaccine to the people, but also would there be willingness for people to actually want to get the vaccine? So I had sort of two issues that I was dealing with to create a kind of momentum on both sides. I did this illustration by hand. I draw kind of the old-fashioned way on pen and paper, and was inspired by some of the old propaganda posters from World War II and also Russian propaganda, which is kind of funny, ironically. But I wanted to create this emphasis that this was needed immediately, and the hope that not only would people be able to get the vaccine, but they would want to get the vaccine.
Yeah, talk about that. That's something that a lot of people notice. You know, we've done a handful of these handouts now. So I've stood there for a few hours with people as they pick up the posters. And a lot of people have noticed that, you know, oh, it kind of looks like propaganda in kind of a fun, winky kind of way. Mm-hmm. So why use like propaganda kind of imagery to promote something like this that's, you know, about healthcare or something?
Well, I thought about some different ideas. And I think one of the issues, I kind of wanted to stay away from typical imagery that would be associated with a vaccine, something like a needle, because that obviously has a lot of strange connotations to people. A lot of people are very fearful of a needle or the idea of even getting a vaccine. So I wanted to take that concept and make it a little bit more energetic. And yes, absolutely, the propaganda perspective was a little bit winky. It was a little ironic. It was meant to be that way. But I also thought, if you look at some of those old images, they're really powerful, which was something that I was attracted to. And I thought in doing it in black and white, it would draw attention even more so because it was very stark.
And now most of the artists we work with are graphic designers, but
yes,
you are an illustrator. I think you and Chris are illustrators. So you had a different process where you had to draw, or you drew, I don't know. Yeah, drew your illustration and then scanned it in. Talk about that process, because was it new for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't often use Photoshop, or I don't do that kind of graphic design. So I did have to scan this. This was totally done by hand on paper, which is the way I usually work. So making sure that it fit all of the guidelines and perspective that you guys needed, I had to make sure that would be effective. Yeah, it was a little bit different. I wasn't quite sure how some of the other folks were doing it.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of a project like this is, you know, everyone kind of approaches it a different way. And just, again, me as like curator, I was so excited. You know, we did this project very quickly and all the posters came back and were all very different from each other, which is awesome. I think that just speaks to how each of you took your issue and took your artwork and kind of brought it together in a beautiful way. One last thing, can we talk about, because I'm actually kind of curious now because I forget, because again, we work so quickly. How did we end up on COVID-19 We Can Beat It? Because if I remember, there were a few different options there that you had.
We did. I think I was going back and forth with a couple of different taglines, and it just wasn't quite there. And I think when we did a little bit of brainstorming, we came up with something that was focused on that community idea, that communal thing, that we can beat it, like we're together, we're in this together. And I really liked that. I thought it spoke to what I was trying to accomplish here.
Awesome. And Derick, let's move over to you. What is your poster? What is the issue you selected? Why did you select that issue? Why was it important to you? And then how do you take that idea and turn it around into a poster? You know, kind of behind the scenes stuff, you were the first person to get your file to me. Like, you did it very quickly. I was almost like, is this something you're working on already? Yeah. So talk about that process, why you chose this issue, this policy, and how you created the poster.
So basically, I mean, this is like, I've always kind of believed that healthcare should be free. Like, I don't really understand why there's so many hoops and checks and balances and just outright like chaos you have to go through. Like, if you just are like, hey man, my back hurts, like, let me see if I can go like to the doctor and like talk to them about this. Like, I've had back issues like pretty much my whole like adult life, and every time I've gone in, and I've been uninsured for most of my like adult life, and every time the doctor basically just kind of like looks at me and is like, well, you don't have insurance, so I can't prescribe you to go get physical therapy, so I don't know, stretch, drink some more water. Like, you know, I kind of get left with like stupid answers. So it was really between the universal health care, or the other thing that I fight a lot is like student debt, and that one's already taken. So this one, yeah, I just chose it because me and my girlfriend actually went to go get COVID tests to go see her father for Thanksgiving. And the line, I mean, we got there at like 6 in the morning, and the line was like insane, like already just super long. So the entire time I was sketching, just like drawing the line. And as soon as we would advance, I would draw more people. And I was like, I'm going to do something with this one day. And then you hit me up and you were like, hey, do you want to be a part of this? And I was like, yeah, totally. And so I kind of had the idea, but I actually really like one of the other ideas that I sent you more than this one. It was like I think it was like a homeless person sitting with like a sign that said, fight for universal healthcare or something like that. But I went with this one. I'm pretty fast because I work in comics, and like, I mean, deadlines are usually like, hey, we need a cover, or we need like 8 pages, and like the deadline's in 5 days, so go. So yeah, I don't know, I work pretty fast from that. So, and then this is pretty much a kind of newer way I've wanted to work in 2020. I wanted to add more color and a little bit more figurative work into my illustrations, because I didn't really like, my normal stuff is kind of known for being dark, very high contrast, very stark imagery. And, you know, with like having like a title or having like the subject matter already being like fight for universal healthcare, I kind of wanted it to be a little light and just kind of a little bit more like easy to kind of take in, since I feel like this kind of affects a lot of people. I didn't want it to be so, you know, hammered in, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I remember, you know, the first time I saw it too, I remember just thinking like, with an illustration like this, you kind of you look at you make eye contact with all the characters, and you kind of put yourself in your shoes, and the guy whose like head is back like this, and like, oh, he feels it. He's been in this line for too long.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting when you sent the design over. I thought it was really interesting that you chose to do a COVID line, because, you know, I think like, it's hard for me to understand how we could go through a year like we just have with this health emergency, that has just like laid bare this fact that if we don't offer healthcare to everyone, it hurts everyone, right? When we have a weak healthcare system, everyone is at a disadvantage. And, you know, I mean, there's still time. I hope that we can just sort of come together as a country and realize like, we need to offer this as a basic human right. I mean, so many other countries have, right?
Yeah.
Wait, did I hear you say you were actually drawing this in the COVID line?
No, not this particular piece. Like, I just brought my sketchbook because I don't know, I get bored really easy, and I'm trying to just draw from life more. So I just had my sketchbook with me. I actually didn't use any of the figures that I sketched. I just grabbed my girlfriend, and I was just like, yo, let's just stand in like a line in my studio, and we took like a bunch of like you know, shots, and I just made up all the characters based off the poses that we did. But and then I work traditionally, so this is watercolor and ink, and yeah, scanned it in, shopped it right over to you.
And then in a lot of your work, you know, I think we first met when you did a mural at the airport, and you'll like do a Philly building, and then you'll like pay homage to like graffiti culture or like tagging culture, and you'll do like tags in your illustration or in your murals and stuff. So I thought it was really interesting too that you chose to do the copy that we asked you to have, you know, the Biden-Harris like demand, and then your message, fight for universal healthcare, in those sort of like graffiti-esque styles. Why did you choose to do that?
Oh, because, you know, I wanted to keep it still on brand, you know, like, I mean, this is some Derick Jones stuff. It's got to be dirty. It's got to be gritty. I wanted it to be seen as like a Philly thing. And I feel like, you know, Philly has awesome graffiti. I'm never going to take that out of my style. Like that's a way that I can give back to the city that, you know, I call home. I thought it would be cool anyway, I wanted this whole piece to really just be like all done by hand. I'm kind of taking a step back from using Photoshop and my iPad so much. I'm just kind of staying like all analog as much as possible this year. I did cheat and did the free COVID test part. I did that in like Photoshop because I was just like, I can't write like just normal wording. I can only do like graffiti writing. So I feel like it would have been kind of weird if like the free COVID test was like also done like in wild style.
And Lisa, you know, this project started with 10 artists and 10 posters. And we got a great response when it launched. We were in the Philadelphia Inquirer. We, had one of the covers of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we had a lot of folks in Philly really eager to like get the posters or share artwork. And you DM'd me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about bringing awareness to?" Effectively, you said, "Have you ever thought about using this project to bring awareness to what's happening in Kensington right now?" And so from our conversation, I asked Jane Golden if we could extend the project, bring in 3 more artists, hire you, and find 2 other artists to do 3 more posters. We found that funding pretty quickly, and then you moved on it. So I'd love, not only did you choose your issue, why did you choose to DM me, and why did you choose your issue, and then how did you take that and turn it into a poster?
So I chose my issue because I have a family member and many friends who have substance use disorder. Some are in recovery, some are not. And for the past 4 years, I've been in Kensington facilitating art workshops with people who use drugs, both in recovery and actively using. A lot of people experiencing homelessness. I grew up in Kensington, so the area is familiar to me. And there's a lot going on there. And I think that people see Kensington in the news and they have a bad reaction to it, and they think that it's all horrible things that happen there. But there are some amazing things that happen there. Like, for 3 years, we had the Kensington storefront right at Somerset, and we had an open art studio, and we would welcome people into the space. I also do art workshops at Prevention Point, which is the needle exchange in Kensington. It's way more than a needle exchange, but that's what it started out as. So, and this, my drawing is based on a photograph that I took of someone's hand with the love tattoo on their knuckles. And it's also, I made a t-shirt out of it for the group of us who do this kind of work in Kensington.
Yeah, and I'm getting the background is weaving, I'm guessing.
Oh, no. So the background is just mandalas that I draw constantly. Like a lot of times when I'm down there and doing these workshops, like I'll sit and I'll just draw mandalas and then give them to people to color in. So it's like an easy way for people to sort of be making art, even if they don't consider themselves artists.
What's a mandala? I've never heard that term before. I don't think.
The circle-y things in the background.
Okay. Why did you choose roses?
So I chose roses because so growing up in Kensington, my mom and pop lived down the street from me, and my mom grew red roses in her little tiny like concrete backyard. She had this tiny little bit of dirt back there, and I always think that she's the reason that I'm an artist today, because she took the time to make art with me, always drawing with me, coloring with me. We would go to like the junk store on Front Street and buy a bunch of stuff and make art with it. So that's a nod to her. Yeah. You mentioned
before we move on, you mentioned the Kensington storefront too, which is a program that's in part with the mural arts program. You said it was closed. I'm guessing it's closed because of COVID. Are there plans to reopen it?
There are, yes. So there are, it's temporarily closed, and there are plans to move the space to a different location and reopen. But in the meantime, there are a bunch of us artists from the storefront who are doing workshops like out in the community. For instance, there's a meal site at Ruth and Clearfield that we call the Love Lot, and they serve lunch every day except Sunday. And so starting in April, I'll be doing some art workshops there outside. Some of us are doing workshops at Prevention Point and the Last Stop.
Okay, awesome. And then Candy, when COVID was really starting like last March and through the summer, there was so much, it seemed to me anyway, at least the people I'm following on Twitter, there was so much pressure on politicians to cancel rent debt, maybe cancel mortgage debt, or work with banks to offer people relief for a year or two during this pandemic, whatever it was. And I know there was progress made. We'll talk with Jonathan later about what just got passed with the new $1.9 trillion relief bill. But talk about your poster, why you chose the topic that you did, and then how you illustrated that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for starting us off. And asking these insightful questions. Appreciate that. Um, so, one thing that I think about a lot these days, especially as a freelance artist, when the pandemic started, or, the quarantine started, I lost a lot of gigs, right? A lot of my gigs depended on me being in person as an educator, and as a contract worker. And, I feel privileged to say that I was able to make it through fine, but there was a very genuine fear there because of the precarity that freelance artists experience, that working class folks experience, right? Like, it's astounding. Most of us don't have a decent savings to get us through 3 months of unemployment. So the precarity that most of us in this country experience is real, and being at the point of eviction isn't unreal, right? Like, it could happen in an instant, and that's something that we don't talk about, right? It's something that became it became very real for folks when the pandemic started, as people were getting laid off, as we were confronted with those realities. And then, in addition to knowing that if we were to be evicted, we would it's a health issue, right? Because then, we are at higher risk of getting COVID and all of that stuff. So, you know, aside from the fact that it's something that is just very present and something that I think about often, how, especially with the ridiculous rent prices in Philly, they continue to skyrocket, right? Each year, it's a whole new thing. And I don't think I've ever had to move as much before I got to Philly, right? And I know so many folks who just have to move yearly, housing instability. I mean, all of those things can impact our health negatively. And yeah, COVID just really escalated that for us. So that's why I felt that this was important. Like, having a roof over your head should not be a privilege. It's a fundamental, basic human right, period. I'm thinking right now about Texas and what they just went through, and can't imagine somebody not having a home to call a refuge, right? In a moment like that, or even just in Philly, like, any regular winter storm, right? If you don't have that refuge, like, that is a real danger. So, like, how do you expect folks? How can you call housing a privilege when you need it for survival, right? So doesn't make sense. So that's why I feel like this is really important for me, that nobody should fear having to figure that out. Nobody should fear being evicted from their homes. Nobody should fear, COVID or any of the uncertainties of not having a home. So what really inspired this poster is, just like, at least for me, the feeling of coming home at the end of the day, at least, pre-COVID, and, coming home and it's sunset, and, it's like just that relief. It's like, I get to rest. I get to lay my head somewhere, right? That is really like kind of the feeling that I wanted to give off. And I also was trying to dig a little deeper into like some of my print training. I feel like usually when I get new projects, especially if they're in a medium that is like new to me, I usually like try new things, and I'm like, no, this time around I actually want to also evoke that print background in a way, which is why I decided to do kind of like the gradient in the back, which for printers would be like a rainbow roll, right? And wanted it to have that feel of, I could have like carved this on a lino, or I could have carved this on a block, or I could have screen printed this. So that was how I arrived at some of these textures, and just the approach of, I did, this was a hand drawing that then I kind of like manipulated and played around with. Yeah.
And I loved you. I was going to ask you about the colors, because I suspected it was sunset, and like sort of that I suspected it was sunset, but it's so beautiful. You just said too, like, not only is it sunset, but it's meant to evoke that feeling of like, after a long day, you come home and you have somewhere to rest your head, right? And you can re-energize and build, you know, have a family and all that kind of stuff. That's beautiful. And I agree with you. I think that like we should have some basic human rights that include housing, food, healthcare. Even if you're a capitalist, like if we have a country where people don't have to, you know, live on the street if they don't want to, and can have food, you know, that even is good for capitalism. So like, I don't understand why this isn't something we can all meet in the middle on. Right. One thing I was interested to talk with you all about, and that we got into a conversation with on the last talk was just sort of struggles with a project like this. I don't know of the 28, 30 people on right now. I don't know how many of them are artists, but oftentimes it's a lot of artists who tune into conversations like this. What were some of the biggest challenges for working on a project like this? Was it timeline? Was it, again, taking your concept, your issue line, your policy line, and turning it into artwork? Was it something else? I'm always curious to ask what were some of the challenges that you had with a project like that? Yeah, go ahead, Candy.
Yeah, one thing that I'm always asking myself is, how do I activate the work, right? And, you know, yes, with these posters, I think the cool thing is that they exist on the windows, they live out in the world, right? So that's a form of activation. You know, with murals, you know, when people interact with them, just in their day-to-day routines, like that's a way to activate. But I'm always also like, how do we, you know, activate on another level where, you know, people can benefit from this directly, right? So that is always a question that I have, because I want to make sure, because so I believe, right, that rent and mortgage should be canceled and all of this, and there are people with immediate needs, right? So while we wait for people in government to get their stuff together, you know, how do we make sure that people are get their needs met right now, especially our most vulnerable people? So I think, you know, one thing that I came to was, okay, so I want to make sure that I take this moment to lift up people that I believe in, right? Or like work that I believe in, or, you know, things that I believe in. So I'm just gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna do a little quick shout out for folks. So there's this sanctuary being built in Costa Rica for Black folks, Black queer folks, Black trans folks, called La Semilla del Sol Santuario. Follow them on Instagram, please, and, you know, contribute to them building this sanctuary space. I'm thinking of Housing Reparations Philly, right? That's a space where people, you know, ask for their needs to be met, and it is on us, you know, to the best of our capacities to help those folks get their needs met. And citywide mutual aid as well, like they gather resources to give to folks who don't have homes right now, right? Especially during winter. I mean, we're at the cusp of it, we're moving past it, but, you know, want to make sure that folks get those resources immediately, you know, while we wait for all of the other stuff to happen.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here real quick and say a couple of things. One, Victoria and the Mural Arts team is going to send an email out. So if you've RSVP'd for this, we're going to send an email with some action items like that, like who you could support. And two, you know, I know this campaign was more about pressuring the new federal administration, and the fact that we, for the first time in 10 years, have Democrats in the White House and the Congress. So there's, you know, some number of things we can do there without too much pushback. But in addition to that, the mayor's budget hearings will be happening on April 15th. So keep your ears to the ground on that. The mayor will be releasing his budget, the mayor of Philadelphia, and then there'll be hearings, and you can tune in and sort of fight for, make sure funding goes to various groups and policies. But that's right around the corner, honestly. One last thing, I don't think I mentioned this, but if you're interested in printing any of these posters, if any of these issues are important to you, or you feel like you'd love to use your quasi-public space, your window, to promote these issues, you can download the files all for free at Mural Arts website, muralarts.org/first100days. Download them for free. And if you have a printer, you can use your own printer, or you go to a place like Fireball or a local printer. And for 1 or 2 prints, it's very inexpensive, a couple of dollars. Did anyone else want to talk about, you know, you know, challenges with working on a project like this? Yeah, let's do Lisa, and then we'll go to Derick.
So for me, it was the wording of the poster. And you and I had talked about all of these things that we could say on the poster, but I think we needed it to be accessible to people and to have them understand what we were talking about, and to be sort of sensitive to the words that we used, talking about this issue.
Yeah, and I think with me and you too, yeah, we went back and forth a lot on that actually. And you actually engaged other community members who were engaged in your work, I remember, and we kind of bounced a few ideas off them. It's also in conversation with what, I'm hearing on Twitter and just like national conversations about, I think more and more people are realizing that it's the war on drugs effort that was kicked off by, I don't know who, Reagan, I guess. I don't know. It has completely failed, and it criminalizes a health issue, right? It's wrong. It's wrong, period. I think most Americans believe that now. So how do we readdress those issues? Get people out of prison, get people the help that they need, support human beings. We're all human. Now I'm getting riled up. Derick, okay, what?
Do it.
So actually, it was can I just say one thing before you?
Yeah, go for it.
So it was Nixon, and it'll be 50 years this year that he started the war on drugs, which
Nixon.
is actually a war on people, not drugs. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, yeah. Okay, and then go ahead, Derick, yeah.
I think just with like any project, it's like, how do you make this interesting? Like, how do you make like the subject matter really pop? And you only get one chance to really kind of nail it. So, with mine in particular, I really wanted to try and resonate with people that have had to stand in these gigantic lines and like all the emotions that are going through your head the entire time you're sitting there. Like, you're just so bored, but you're also like, you're supposed to stand 6 feet from each other. So it's not like you can like turn to the person behind you or in front of you and like start up a conversation. So yeah, that was like a hard part, to really try to make it as human as possible.
That's what I thought was so brilliant about your poster. And then we'll go to Natalie. Was I didn't know what to expect. You told me what issue you wanted to talk about, and then you sent me the poster design. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I saw it and I saw the COVID line and I saw the poster COVID testing, I realized that the brilliant thing you did was like bring it to the now, bring it to this like weight that people are feeling now about themselves and their relatives and their loved ones, and everyone needing access to affordable healthcare, free healthcare. I shouldn't even use free because we all pay taxes, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
You did a great job there of like bringing that immediacy to the poster.
Thank you.
Natalie, yeah, well, go ahead.
There were obviously challenges in the fact of many of the things these folks have also said, but I actually found this really hopeful. It felt like after 4 really, really long years, you gave us this great opportunity to be able to say something, to actually make a statement with art and to be compensated and to have those things be out there in the world for people to be able to have them. And that felt super, super hopeful to me. I think we had talked about that at one point, Conrad, where we both were like really excited about this, that it seemed different. It seemed like there was something refreshing. And as I was just thinking about this, I drove past the convention center earlier today, and I saw people lined up to get the COVID vaccination. And it made me feel amazing because I wasn't sure that was going to be the case. And just seeing that kind of reiterated how important this could be. So I thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I thank you all for being a part of this. You all said yes very quickly and created incredible posters. And yeah, anyone who follows me on social media knows Biden wasn't my first or third choice. But I do recognize that we live in a time where Democrats now, again, like I said before, are in control of the House and the Congress for the first time in about a decade. And I have a friend named Opiola who talks about, when choosing president or choosing your government leader or whatever, you're picking your best opponent at the end of the day. And Biden is a great opponent. In my opinion, Biden's a great opponent to have, right? He's not my first, second, or third choice, but he's moving on issues and we can fight for things. Are we going to get everything that we want? Probably not, but it's not a reason to stop fighting. And I think my worry was that after 2 years of a contentious campaign and 4 years of Trump, that it might be very easy to just kind of settle back into being less engaged. And that doesn't help anything. These posters have been out there for a while now. We're about 50 some days into the project, or into Biden and Harris's first 100 days. What kind of responses have you heard from your communities, from people online? Has participating in this project made you engage more in conversations with people around you about the issues that you picked, the policies that you picked? I'd love to hear what sort of response you've heard. And anyone can go. No responses?
Well, I've been seeing tons of people posting when they're getting vaccinated. My Facebook and Instagram is literally full of people's vaccination pictures. And I think that makes me feel like the conversation is being had. And people are actually encouraging other people in their communities and in their social circles to be engaged in this issue. So I'm seeing it more on that end, as opposed to, as far as like community engagement in other ways. I'm seeing it a lot on social media primarily.
Yeah, same. I've seen mine like reposted a bunch, so that gives me hope. And yeah, no one's like hit me up or anything like that, but I don't know. It's like art being thrown into the ether, It's just kind of like, well, I've seen it reposted, so that means someone liked it. So that's good.
Yeah, I've been lucky. Like I walk a lot just for what I do for a living, and I do see the posters out there, and I see people sharing them. We're getting some questions. I see the person commenting on Facebook too. We'll get to questions at the end. I'm just noting that we're seeing them come in, and we will get to those questions. But at this point, before we jump to Jonathan, I want to ask one last question to the artists, or focus on the artists, and that is, can art change things? Can art ignite change? Can these posters change things? Can these posters engage people, excite people? Do you think this project can have a big effect?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, you asked this question with the murals in the fall, right? And I'm gonna say 100,000% yes, it can. Especially when, like I said, activation is such a big part of what makes art powerful, and this idea that you came up with in terms of having the public engage, right? And feel like they are participating by putting those posters up, by even having the chance to go in person and speak to you directly or speak to the artists who are present, etc. But can this project have like an effect? Yeah, because also just having those posters up is a reminder, like these issues still matter every day. These issues are important every day, and like it's a reminder to like stay aware, to stay open, to reach out and stay on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something I say all the time is like advertisers doesn't understand the power of art in the public space, right? That's why they spend so many millions of dollars on outdoor advertising. There's some power in messages and art in the public space. And, these are messages around key important policy issues. And another thing I just as curator was thinking is like, after 4 years of people using the Trump campaign signs as like, almost like the cross, like using it as a symbol, I would just, personally, I would love to see all the Biden signs leave people's windows and be replaced with action signs. So like, not just blank sort of Biden signs, but here, I'm a supporter of these policies and let's push the president and vice president forward. Jonathan, let's bring you in now, and would love to bring you in by reminding people that you're a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. You are not here to, endorse any policy or not endorse any policy, or help us understand the facts a bit better. So welcome, Jonathan. Again, would you like to do a little introduction for those who are tuning in?
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Tamari. If you missed the beginning, I'm the national political reporter for the Inquirer. I'm based in Washington, covered the 2020 campaign. I'm covering the early days of the Biden administration. And Conrad, that's a excellent disclaimer. I appreciate that. And I'm here not to advocate for or against any of these positions, but happy to help folks kind of understand how these things are moving through Congress and through the new administration.
You're a proper journalist, Jonathan. We love it. So let's start. We have 4 issues here. Let's kind of go through each of them. Artists, if you have any additional questions, just feel free to chime in. This is a conversation we're just having now for the last 20 minutes. And again, if you have comments, put them in the comment thread and we'll bring them up as we kind of get to this section of the talk. But Jonathan, let's start with COVID-19 vaccine distribution. Biden, I think, had I just heard recently that everyone will start being vaccinated by May. That's right around the corner. What do you know about vaccine distribution as of right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the #1 project of the new administration. He has said that by May 1st, everybody should be eligible for a vaccine. It doesn't mean everybody's going to be able to rush out that day and get it, but everybody will be eligible. And the president has talked about possibly by July 4th, you could have a small barbecue with your friends and family, and those restrictions will be lifted. There have been challenges. There have been challenges with distributing the vaccine. You know, this is a state-by-state effort largely, and so different states run with different levels of efficiency. And so there's a challenge there, and even different regions of different states. And there's a couple of populations where there's been more difficulty getting people to get the vaccine. One happens to be, there's a large number of Republican voters out there who have said they don't want to take it. You know, all indications are President Trump said, you know, he kind of downplayed the seriousness of the coronavirus. He downplayed the reputations of scientists and science in general. We've seen that trickle down to a lot of Republican voters who, you know, are not taking it as much of a threat as a lot of other people are. And so there's a concern about, in some of these states that are deep red states, will there be enough people getting vaccinated to really contain the spread of the virus? And then you're also seeing issues with a lot of Black and brown communities and low-income communities. Part of that being a history of discrimination often when it comes to Black people and science and medicine, and also just a gap often when it comes to technology. A lot of these signups are online, and you know, not everybody has great internet access. And so you're seeing a lot of times people who are tech savvy, younger, have nice internet access, are able to go and sign up. And some of the folks in these other communities are not. And so there is money in this stimulus bill to help hire new workers. You know, I was talking to the health director in Burlington County in South Jersey about how they're going to hire people to actually go out into these communities so that you don't have to necessarily be on a computer to sign up. They'll have a van there to help distribute the vaccines and to kind of spread the word. So those are two of the big challenges that are remaining in trying to get it out. But there's certainly a lot of progress, a lot of hope, but also some reasons for concern to keep an eye on.
And if we move into universal healthcare, you know, each of the artists chose various issues. You know, some artists chose campaign promises that Biden and Harris made, and then some chose to ask the administration to move forward on issues. And I agree with Derick. You know, I believe in universal healthcare, single payer healthcare. It's obviously not something that Biden and Harris campaigned on. But do you know where they're at right now, about 50, 60 days into this? Have they made any signals? You know, one thing Biden said during the campaign was that he would expand Medicaid and expand access to healthcare for some number of millions of Americans. Where are we at now, some 60 days past? And was there anything in the $1.9 trillion relief bill that would signal one way or the other about how they are going to handle it?
So they are. And I thought it was interesting that you had Natalie and Derick up first because, you know, the vaccines and healthcare are obviously interrelated issues. And, you know, Israel is one of the countries that has actually done the best as far as getting its population vaccinated. And part of that is just, it's a small country. Numbers wise, it's a small country physically, so it's really easy to move the vaccines around. But part of it is that they have a totally centralized healthcare system and totally digitized healthcare system. And so it's much simpler there, where we have this very fragmented system that's different by state, by insurer. And so that has proven to be a big advantage to them in getting a significant part of their population vaccinated. Obviously, we don't have that here. As far as expanding healthcare goes, yeah, Biden campaigned explicitly as being the Democrat who was against Medicare for all. So, you know, I don't think they have the votes for it. Even if they did, he's not a person who's going to be out campaigning for it. That said, they did take some steps in the stimulus bill to expand healthcare, mostly building on the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as most people know it. I've taken some notes, so I'm going to read a little bit from here because I don't have it all totally memorized. But they've some of the provisions.
Every little thing, Jonathan. Come on.
This is why I have editors for. They're offering 6 months of free COBRA if you've lost your coverage in the past year. That's in the stimulus bill. They're reopening. Usually there's only a limited window for you to to go and sign up for the Affordable Care Act. They're expanding that window now for more people to go back if you don't have insurance and want to sign up for it. They're increasing the subsidies for people, increasing the tax credits to try to make it less expensive. And if you've been unemployed this year, those increases are significant enough to help get a free silver plan, which is, I think, the mid-tier plan on Obamacare of the tiers that they have. So they're kind of building on Obamacare. It's still building within the private health insurance system, but they're trying to make it more affordable and more accessible to people, understanding that so many people lost their jobs. And here in America, most people's insurance is tied to their jobs.
Yeah, this feels to me like there's no way this country can move forward without universal healthcare eventually. It seems to me like, why are we taking these tiny, tiny baby steps? But that's where we're at. One of the other issues was sort of canceling rent debt or helping with mortgage debt. The general idea of housing as a human right, housing for all. Was there anything in the relief bill that sort of addressed sort of housing inequities, housing problems, and supported offering places for unhoused people to live?
There was some more short-term kind of relief. It's not as much forward-looking policy changes as much as money to try to help people get through this period while we're still kind of in a COVID world and the economy is still not what it was. So there's $27 billion for rental assistance, $10 billion for mortgage relief, $5 billion to aid people experiencing homelessness. So those are some big numbers. They're not nearly as much as what advocates say would be needed. I think there's an estimate that people are, that the amount that people owe in rent is twice as large as what was passed in that stimulus bill. So clearly it's not going to address all of the, it'll address, they hope, some of the need. Biden has imposed an eviction moratorium. I believe that is only through the end of this month, though, and it's been challenged in court. So that is an issue that I think is still kind of lingering to be dealt with. And they've provided, as I said, some assistance, but not nearly as much as I think advocates on those issues would say is necessarily needed. He has talked about having some more sweeping changes to housing equity, but that's more likely to come from more of a long-term policy process as opposed to this one stimulus bill where, because the rules they passed it under, they were somewhat limited in how much policy they could make. They could shove more money out the door, but they couldn't necessarily make a lot of new policy under that bill.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where, if you just follow that logic, right? If they're offering tens of billions of dollars for rental and mortgage assistance, then there's an understanding that making sure that people are housing stable is a good thing, right? So follow that in my head, follow that logic through, right? Offer sort of greater support.
There is an understanding, again, I think you could debate whether it's quite enough.
Right. And then we'll get to Lisa's issue and then into audience questions. We have a few coming in, so thank you for those who are typing them, or if you've yet to type them now, because we'll have a good 10, 15 minutes to talk. The war on drugs, the war on people, as Lisa put it brilliantly, is failed. So is there any, in these first 50, 60 days, any notice, any idea that Biden and Harris are going to move away from the war on drugs and invest in harm reduction for people?
I think that this has been happening for some time in Washington. I think the opioid crisis has been treated differently than some of the drug crises of the past that we've seen. I think a large part of that probably has to do with who is suffering from it, where it's not only people in urban areas, it's not only seen as a problem of people of color, as some of the past issues have been, where it's been seen as well, that's their problem. The opioid crisis has reached communities all across the country, and I think that's brought a different response from some people who might normally have been taking a law and order stance. Now that it's in their community, they say, well, it's a problem to be treated and to be aided. So I think there has been a different position on it. It's still a huge problem for people to get their arms around. I think that there is broad sympathy in both parties to try to treat this as as a problem to be aided and not as a law enforcement issue, as we've seen in the past, where often they've said, well, this is something where you just need to arrest more people. I think there is a different attitude this time around. I don't know that they have the perfect solution yet.
Okay. And Jonathan, stick around, be a part of the questions. If any of the artists have more follow-up questions for Jonathan, let me know, chime in. Otherwise, I can get to some of the questions from people tuning in. One of those questions is from Facebook. And I guess it's to us, specifically Candy. The question is, why cancel debt versus showing one how to get out of debt? I would say that I think the cards are so stacked against the working and the poor in this country. Statistically, we have more income inequality than like since the 30s. And I think that's why we need sort of big, bold ideas. President Biden talks a lot about moving forward through this administration with big, bold ideas. I think that would be a big, bold idea to help reset the economic cards in the favor of the working and the poor in this country. But also, I don't think people should be homeless. I don't know. I don't think we should live in a country that can't figure out a way to make sure people don't fall off the cliff. Candy, what do you think? Why? The question was, why cancel debt and why not just show people how to get out of debt?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think there's layers to it. So, there's a lot of people in this country who are working with systems of oppression, who, don't have generational wealth, who don't have that generational stability, right? Have to work twice as hard to be able to, attain that stability if that's, the goal, right? And so, I think it's important for us to like kind of move away from like the bootstrapping mentality and like realize that we need to be supporting each other, and like, we're only as a society, as a collective, we're only as strong as our most vulnerable folks, right? And we need to be centering the needs of those vulnerable folks, and also like some of those vulnerable folks didn't choose to be vulnerable, right? Like they were put in that position, and so I would say that that's why that's important. I'm thinking about a lot of essential workers or a lot of folks who got laid off in a moment's notice, right? Or who are still going through that process. Like, we should be able, especially when we have the resources, right? As a country, as a society, we have the resources. Right now, there's so many buildings that are not being used at all, right? Like, why can't they be used for housing folks who need that, right? Why do we hoard resources and not spread those? So I think that's really why I think it's important. I mean, in an ideal world, right? Like we'd all start out at the same playing field, at the same level playing field, and that's definitely not the case.
Yeah. This next question is from actually one of the first 100 Days artists, Krista Lai. And the question is, do y'all ever feel, just as artists, and particularly as artists, I guess, working on a project like this, where you're advocating for policies, right? You're advocating for change in the government. Do you ever struggle with imposter syndrome? And if so, how do you cope with that? What do you do to stay motivated when you feel discouraged or defeated? That's to everyone. So who would like to go first? That's a great question. Derick, you unmuted?
Yeah, I'll do it. You just gotta just bite down and just keep making art. You can curse on this thing, right? You just gotta make shitty art. Like, just make a bunch of really bad art, and by like the 5th bad art, it won't be as bad as like the first one you did. Just keep making stuff. Like, I put myself, like, sometimes if I'm like really low, I'll just make myself do like a 30-day challenge where I just do a small piece every single day, and you're not thinking about the willies anymore at that point. You're just going. So yeah, you're not alone. Also.
Yeah, I think it's a super common thing. I would say too, with all these issues, none of these issues live outside of like the grander, I mean, all of these issues that y'all are promoting, all these policies live well within what a lot of people on the left side of the Democratic Party are fighting for. So I don't think there's anything too outrageous here. These are all kind of basic stuff. Candy, you raise your hand?
Yeah, so one thing that and I'm going to put myself on the spot, right? Like as, you know, somebody who is brown, non-binary, queer, right? I'm very aware of the fact that a lot of spaces were not meant for me. And, you know, one thing that I'm always asking myself is like, who put that seed of doubt in your head, right? And I'm always reminding myself to challenge those doubts. So when I, you know, have those voices pop up, I'm like, whose voice is that? Because it's not mine, right? Who is it? Who put that? And then just acknowledging that and like having a response, you know, saying like, you know, that's not true. Like you are capable, you are talented. And also like, what is it, you know, like all of these arbitrary measures of success and like talent and whatever. So who said that? Who told you that? You know,
it's such a great answer. Natalie, you just
absolutely, exactly what Candy and what Derick both said. And I actually think the older I get, the more confident I get. I think when I was younger, I wasn't quite as focused, or I wasn't sure that I had that voice. And I work also as a journalist too. So it's interesting. It's like I'm wearing two different hats. But with this project, I feel like I kind of went into my journalist mode and did a little bit of research and studied it and took it to a different place with the art. But I think it really comes from what Derick was saying. You just got to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Even if it's just not the greatest stuff you've ever done, you're doing it and you're going to get better at it.
Lisa, did you want to add to that? Yeah.
So I agree with everything everyone said. And also outside of being an artist, I also had imposter syndrome, thinking about, talking about what my poster was about and thinking, who am I to talk about this stuff? And then realizing like, well, why not talk about this stuff? I mean, I do the work and I know a lot about it, so I should talk about it. And I think once you put yourself out there, it gets other people more comfortable being able to talk about things that are maybe uncomfortable to talk about, or that have like a lot of shame surrounding them. So yeah, put yourself out there, talk about it.
Yeah, more than imposter syndrome, Lisa, like you created space for yourself in this project. Like you are the reason you're in this project, right? Like we had worked together in the past, like we worked together in 2017, but you got in touch with me, you know, you have my cell phone and all that kind of stuff. And we got to talking. I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Let me fight for this money. We found it. And because your idea was so on point, Mural Arts found the money really quickly. I mean, so it's like your imposter syndrome would have went away right immediately, like because how quickly all can. What?
Except it didn't, yeah.
Well, I mean, it took a few weeks, but I mean, money doesn't grow on trees in nonprofits. Jonathan, we have a question for you, and then I have one more question for the artist, unless people have more questions they want to type in. Everyone's sticking around. So this question is great. I'm going to try to read it verbatim. It says, Jonathan, do you think the new administration is committed to doing a deep dive, evaluating and making adjustments for rehab and harm reduction strategies so that we can see sustainable change and hope around recovery, and not just money from Sackler lawsuits dispersed to broken systems? I don't know exactly what that means. If anyone else can chime in there.
Well, the Sacklers are a family. They're the family behind one of the major opioid companies, and have been found. And I don't have the details right in front of me, but there was a major lawsuit against them, basically saying they knew this was dangerous stuff and they distributed it and pushed their drug representatives to distribute it and have doctors give it out as much as possible. It's in some ways similar to the tobacco lawsuits of decades ago, and there's been a lot of money. I again, don't quote me on exactly where it stands, but there's been a lot of money sought, and I believe in some cases received already against the family. And they're these hugely wealthy donors. There's art museums in DC that have their names on them, but this is where a lot of their money came from. As far as the broader question of the deeper dive, I don't think we've seen enough quite yet from the administration to know exactly how they're going to address this issue. They really have been focused on this stimulus bill, on getting these vaccines out. That's been the top issues for them here at the beginning. So I think we still need to wait and kind of see exactly what their approach will be. I will say the president has talked about his own son having issues with addiction. So I think he's coming to this from a different place than maybe some past presidents have. Interestingly, Cory Booker of New Jersey is somebody I cover really closely. He's been a person who has been very much outspoken against about decriminalizing marijuana, about lessening the penalties for drug offenses. His chief of staff just became the chief of staff for the new Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Now, you can't necessarily draw a straight line. There's a lot of issues that he worked on, but I think that could be an interesting thing to see if or how that informs the way the Attorney General, who's of course the top law enforcement official in the country, directs law enforcement to handle some of these issues. I would not be surprised if there was at some point a different approach on opioids, but I don't think that's something the administration has really gotten into yet at this point.
So it's one of many places where advocacy is so needed. And I want to get into that in a second. Artists, I'd love for you to think about this final question as I say something in between. And that final question will be a great question that Niall Livingston, an artist I work with a ton, asked the artist in the last call. It's a great question. How do you define success in your career right now? How are you defining success in your career right now? And I'll ask each of you that as I come back from this, but I would love to remind everyone watching that, in addition to the posters, which again, you can print for free at muralarts.org/first100days, you can print them, download them yourself, print them at your home computer, or go to a local printer and pay a few bucks to get it printed. You can also come out to our handouts. We're actually going to be doing 2 more free handouts. Locations and times and dates still to be determined, but if you're in the Mural Arts system, we'll send you emails. The other thing is, use our website, muralarts.org/first100days. We have all the information there that you need to contact your federal representatives. You can contact the White House, you can contact your senators, and you can contact your representatives in the House. That's so important. Jonathan can admit to this because we talked about it last time, but all politicians will say the tweets are great. Signs and windows are good too. Showing up to rallies is of course really important, but calling your representatives in DC does so much. One is recorded in a different way. So, it's actually recorded sort of for history's sake. But they really hate being bugged in one way or another. Jonathan, right?
Yeah, as I said last time, they track, who's calling on what issue and what position they're taking. So look, you're not going to change somebody who's against gun control to all of a sudden supporting gun control. But if there's somebody who's on the fence about a certain issue and they're not sure which way they're going to go, those calls can make a difference into which way they think the kind of energy and the grassroots activism is leaning on a certain issue and how engaged people are on a certain issue.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're not going to flip someone 180, but depending on where you live, probably your representative reflects you in some way or another. I shouldn't say that actually, but I will say that if you live in the Philadelphia area, everyone who's in DC right now, with the exception of Toomey, is a Democrat. So, you could call them and say, hi, I voted for you, and I want to see action on this, right? You don't need to have this gigantic script. You don't need to, all you have to do is call and say, hi, I'm a voter from your district. I voted for you in the last election. What are you doing to extend healthcare? Are you fighting for universal healthcare? Are you fighting to end the war on drugs? And ask them what their response is, and they have to respond in some way or another. It's so easy to do. Set up a Google Calendar. If you have the time and space to do that, of course, not everyone does, but if you do, it's a great thing to do. Natalie, let's start with you. How are you sort of measuring success in this moment in your career?
That is a great question and a very tough question. I'm sitting here trying to think. I think it's two-pronged in a way. I know when I challenge myself, like a project like this, if I challenge myself and I'm content and happy with the results, at least for a little while, I feel like that's a success. But I also think a lot of it has to do with how people react to the art that I'm making. If they're excited by it, if they want to support it, if they show up and just kind of check it out when I have an exhibition, or they comment on something on social media, I feel like there's an element of success there because I'm reaching people. And that is really, really fulfilling in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's monetary success or any of those other things that matter nearly as much. I think it's being able to do these things and also having some sort of an audience that is willing to have a conversation about it.
Candy, how are you measuring success in your career at this point?
Yeah, I mean, well, I want to start off by saying that I'm learning that I get to define what that success looks like for me. And I'm starting to parse out the ideas that were given to me or that I inherited about what it means to be a successful artist or a successful educator, right? And I'm coming up with my own ideas of what it means to be a successful artist or educator. So I think for me, you know, if I continue to make art regardless of the audience that I have, or, you know, sharing is important. So, but, you know, whoever I choose to share with, then that means that I'm a successful artist, right? Yeah, I for me, like, making art is a form of expression, of course, but it's also a, you know, I say this a lot, it's one of my healing tools. So as I continue to use that for my own healing, and, you know, I share that, and sometimes it resonates with folks and it encourages the healing of others, like, that is wildly successful for me, right? Be it one person or two people. As an educator, you know, just getting to show people what the power of art and what it can do, right, for their lives personally. As long as I can continue to share that, that means I'm being successful. So yeah.
Jonathan, how are you measuring success in your career right now? Would love to know. Is it being a part of stuff like this? I think you were thrilled to be a part of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I mean, it's a tough question because 2020 was such a big year for us at the Inquirer, with so much attention on Pennsylvania, and you know, we really did some of our best work, I think, you know, last year, and including especially in those last 6 months. So honestly, I'm trying to figure out what success is going to look like now going forward, because you know, we had a very focused target of the presidential race all of last year. And this year, it's a little bit different, having a new administration. So, you know, as always, I want to just be writing things that people find engaging, that people find interesting, and providing information that people can use to make good decisions about their government.
Derick, how about you? How are you defining success right now?
Just the fact that I can keep doing it. I can keep putting things out, and there seems to be like an audience that is receptive to it. So that part's awesome. I mean, that's the dream, is to just have stuff and it's moving, and, you know, people are willing to dig it and follow me along on the journey. You know, hopefully, you know, become rich one day. Come next Chapter Fair. I don't know. I'm joking.
And Lisa, how about you?
So success for me right now means if I've created a piece of work that comes from my heart, that's successful for me. Also, it's a little bonus if it touches somebody else in the same way. And also, when I'm doing art workshops with people, I love building those connections, especially with people that I normally maybe wouldn't even speak to, you know, out in the world. So the workshops that I do allow me to, like, talk to a huge range of people, and I love those little connections that happen.
Cool. To our audience, thanks for staying tuned. You know, we're about 10 minutes over. Really appreciate your time. You'll be getting an email from us soon about the various organizations that we talked about tonight that you can support, or other things the artists thought about that we can link you to support. We'll have one more talk in 2 weeks about investing in the people. That's right here, same time, same date. No, well, not same date, but 2 weeks from now, same time. I hope you tune into that. And stay tuned for the 2 more free poster handouts that we'll be announcing soon. Other than that, thank you all for your time, and stay engaged. Great, y'all.
I gotta run. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was great to see all your work. Thank you.